My name is Olivia Hart. I'm 38 years old, and this is the story of how the people I trusted the most stole everything I built. I didn't grow up rich. Nothing was ever handed to me. Not scholarships, not job offers, not shortcuts. Everything I have, I earned. Late nights, cheap coffee, rent checks that bounced more than once. But I clawed my way up. Freelance writing, corporate ghosting, brand strategy. I said yes to every client, every contract, because I had a goal, a number. $630,000. That was the price of my dream. A creative agency, fully mine. No investors, no bosses, no compromises. Just me, my team, and freedom. And after 11 years of working my ass off, I finally had it. The money was real, the plan was solid, and I was so close. 2 months away from launching. I was already looking at offices, signed a lease for a shared space in the East District, interviewed my first 2 hires, ordered the damn logo plaques, and then it vanished. All of it. The savings account I'd been building since I was 27, the emergency backup account, even my business line of credit. At first, I thought it was fraud. External, clean, anonymous. But it wasn't a hacker in some basement. It was my parents. Not metaphorically. Not, they raised me, so they helped build this. I mean, literally. They took it, transferred it out, forged my signature. Over the course of years. They had access because I let them help me manage taxes back when I was drowning in 1099 forms. I thought I was being responsible. They told me they were helping. I didn't question it because they were my parents. And in my mind, betrayal was something that happened to other people. That changed the morning I saw 6 zeros reduced to 0. Not by accident, not by force, by family. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I packed a weekend bag, grabbed my passport, and left town. Because when the people who made you turn out to be the people who broke you, you don't stay. You rebuild. And then, you ruin them back. I walked into the bank that morning with a notebook and a coffee in my hand. It was supposed to be a routine balance check. 10 minutes, in and out. I even had a meeting scheduled right after. First-round interviews for my new assistant. But when the screen loaded, something in me froze. Balance. $3.47. Not in the business account, not in the personal one. All of them. I stared at the teller. My mouth moved, but I wasn't sure what I even said. Her face changed. She typed faster, then slower. Then she asked me to sit down and wait for the manager. That's when I knew. This wasn't a glitch. 20 minutes later, I'm sitting in a private glass office, cold cup of coffee in my hands, staring at printed statements that didn't make sense. Wire transfers. Subtle. Repeating. Masked as family fund reallocations. Each one small enough to go unnoticed. Until you look back at 11 years of them. Same routing numbers. Same last names. My parents' names. They started when I was 28. Back when I first asked for help with tax prep, and my dad suggested setting up a joint operations safety account for business write-offs. I let him set it up. I even signed the forms he handed me without reading them. Because why would I question my own father? When I called them, I still didn't believe it. Part of me thought there had to be another explanation. Identity theft, a mix-up, anything else. My mother picked up. Casual, distracted. She was at the grocery store. I asked her directly, "Did you take money from my accounts?" There was a pause. Not long, barely a breath. Then she said, "Olivia, don't be dramatic. It was family money. We just borrowed it when we needed it. We always meant to put it back." I felt something snap in me. Not a loud break, just something silent, clean, final. When my father got on the phone, he made it worse. "We supported you when you had nothing. The least you could do is give something back. What were you even going to do with that money? Start another of your creative hobbies?" Creative hobbies. That's what he called my life's work. I hung up, stared out the window for a while. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Instead, I booked a bus ticket out of the city. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, because I didn't know. I just knew I couldn't sit in that apartment another night surrounded by the plans I had for a future that no longer existed. I took one bag, a laptop, my backup hard drive, passport, cash, one coat. I slept with my head against the window as the bus rumbled north, snow pressing against the glass like it wanted in. That night, I arrived in a town I hadn't seen in over 15 years. Harmony Falls. Population, maybe 4,000, and 2 retired horses. I hadn't spoken to Grace in 7 years, but I remembered her laugh, her blunt honesty, and the fact that she never asked questions unless you invited them. She opened the door with tired eyes, no makeup, holding a half-burned vanilla candle in one hand. She looked at me for 3 seconds, then stepped aside. "Guest room's full of boxes. You can take the couch. Want something hot?" That was all. No interrogation, no sympathy speeches. Just warmth, silence, and space. And in that space, something inside me began to reassemble. Not my hope, not my trust. Something sharper. A plan. I didn't sleep much those first few nights. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because my brain wouldn't stop sorting through years of details, patterns, phrases they used, things that didn't make sense back then but now clicked together like teeth in a trap. I kept hearing my mother's voice from 6 years ago. "We moved some of your savings into a higher yield fund, sweetheart. It's safer there." Or my father saying, "Let us help you manage the logistics. You're an artist, not an accountant." Artist, not accountant. What a convenient story they told themselves. That I was too creative to understand what was happening to my own money. So I stopped sleeping, and I started building. Grace's couch wasn't comfortable, but it was mine for now. I spent most of the time at her kitchen table, a scratched oak slab from her grandmother's house. I covered it in notebooks, Post-its, old tax returns I had saved on a backup flash drive. I didn't cry. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was designing something. I made a list on the first page of my journal. I don't want their forgiveness. I want 3 things. 1, proof. Undeniable. 2, control of the story. 3, consequence. Not illegal, but unforgettable. The first step was cash. I had maybe $200 in my wallet when I ran, but I still had one weapon. Reputation. Jonah Miles. Self-help king. I wrote every word in his last 2 books. I edited his TED Talk. And I had enough email receipts and voice memos to bury him in bad PR if I wanted to. So I called. "Olivia, are you okay?" I didn't answer that. I said, "Jonah, I need $10,000. I won't explain. I'll pay it back, but I need it wired in 24 hours. Silence. Then, send the details, one time only. That night, I had money. Not much, but enough. Day 2, I drove to a nearby city, 2 hours away. I paid cash for a cheap laptop, the kind students use when their loans come through late. Then I bought a burner phone from a convenience store that smelled like old mop water and gasoline. I wore sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. It wasn't about disguise. It was about shedding my old self, Olivia, the responsible, the dutiful daughter. She was gone. Back at Grace's, I set up a new identity. Eden Lakewood. I built her piece by piece. Fake portfolio website, LinkedIn profile with vague consulting buzzwords, an Upwork account with a perfect 5-star record. All fabricated, all believable. I even printed fake business cards and left a few at cafes around town, just in case anyone went digging. Eden was a ghost, but a ghost with a digital print. Then I rented a micro office in a co-working space under Eden's name. Monthly rate? Paid in cash. Clean, beige, sterile. The kind of place where people start real companies or fake ones. Mine was somewhere in between. I brought nothing personal. Just a mug, a lamp, and a mission. I opened every document I had from the past 11 years. Every statement, every file, every email. I organized them chronologically, then by theme. I color-coded deception. The data told a story. A slow siphoning. My father rerouted funds through a company he claimed was dissolved, Hartwell Holdings. I remembered that name. He once mentioned it casually at dinner, something I helped a friend with years ago. A lie. The company was active, registered to a P.O. box in Nevada, used to purchase a second home in Scottsdale, a house I'd never seen, paid for with my money. My mother was subtler. She used small transactions, transferred for me from one account to another, always just under $5,000. Smart. Kept it under the radar. But she made one mistake. She reused a nickname I created for one of my private saving goals, Red Door 23, a fund I started when I was 29. She used the same name for one of her sub-accounts. That's how I knew she read my journal. That hit deeper than the money. The idea that she wasn't just taking from me, she was watching me while she did it. I scanned everything. Backed it up 3 times. Printed hard copies and mailed them to a trusted friend in another city. Just in case I needed it. I labeled the folder, Hartwell, internal case. One night, Grace walked in and found me surrounded by notes, laptop glowing like a portal. "You okay?" I didn't look up. I just said, "I'm past okay. I'm awake now." She poured 2 glasses of wine, sat across from me, and said, "Whatever you're planning, make sure you don't turn into them." I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I already knew the difference. I wasn't stealing from anyone. I was taking back what was mine. And I wasn't going to do it by screaming. I was going to do it by replacing their lies with precision, by eroding their comfort, slowly, quietly. the same way they erased my future, one transaction at a time. Not in fire and fury, but slowly. Precisely. Like thread pulled from a favorite sweater until it loses all shape. I started with presence. Not confrontation. Presence. I wanted them to feel like they were being watched. And I wanted that fear to come from nowhere. So I drove back to their neighborhood. Not to knock on the door, just to sit. Watch. Wait. I parked 2 streets away and walked past their house with a different coat, a baseball cap, dark sunglasses. Unrecognizable, but familiar enough to make them feel they'd seen me before. I walked the block twice a week, changed times, changed shoes. Once, I even walked a dog I borrowed from Grace's neighbor. Every time, I watched through the corners of my eyes. Curtains moved, lights turned off. They noticed. They just didn't know it was me. Then came the mail. I used a basic redirect form. Online, untraceable, temporary. I didn't reroute everything. Just enough. Their gas bill, a package from a boutique, an envelope from their insurance provider. All sent to a mailbox I rented under the name Marie L. in another zip code. I returned them all a week later, unopened. Just late enough to be irritating. Just often enough to feel targeted. My mother called the post office. My father accused the neighbor's teenager. They changed the lock on the mailbox. It didn't help, because the point wasn't theft. It was disruption. Next, I played with sound. I paid a local teenager $50 a week to blast loud classical music from his car stereo every morning at 5:47 a.m. Nothing illegal, just unpleasant. He parked in front of their house, windows down, Bach or Tchaikovsky pouring out into the cold air. Then he drove off after 10 minutes. 3 days in, they installed a Ring camera. 5 days in, my father tried to confront the kid, who just shrugged and said, "Public street, sir?" That was the beauty of it. I never had to show my face. I just orchestrated tension. But I wasn't done. I went deeper. I created a fake Facebook profile under the name Elena Ward. Middle-aged, business casual, lives nearby. And I added my mother. She accepted. Of course she did. My mother was addicted to polite approval. She collected compliments like coupons. Elena started commenting on her posts. Little things. Backhanded praise. "You look radiant. Such a brave outfit choice for your age." "Love this home decor. I'd never be bold enough for those curtains." Just enough to make her question herself. I watched her replies go from cheerful to clipped. Eventually, she deleted a post entirely. Meanwhile, I used Eden Lakewood's email, my fake consultant identity, to sign my father up for aggressive, executive-only real estate newsletters, fake grant opportunities, and cold call investment offers. His inbox flooded with spam. Some real, some not. One of them offered a clean cash out on distressed properties. I knew he'd bite. He clicked. I tracked it through a dummy link. All legal, all clean, all exhausting. I was burning their time, their attention, their patience. But the most satisfying move I made was entirely analog. I mailed my mother an unmarked brown envelope. Inside was a photo of a safe. Not theirs, just a safe. Printed, glossy, close-up. Taped to the photo was a handwritten note. "Do you know what's inside?" That's it. No name, no context, just enough to spin the wheels. She called my father at work. She tore apart the hallway closet. They replaced the locks on the safe the next day. And I sat at my window, sipping mint tea, listening to jazz through my headphones, and smiled. I watched their energy shift. They used to walk side by side into town. Now they walked 5 steps apart. My mother looked over her shoulder more often. My father had bags under his eyes I'd never seen before. She started keeping her phone face down. He started drinking earlier in the evening. I didn't need to confront them to make them break. I just had to mirror what they did to me. Subtle violations of peace. Private little thefts of certainty. When they stole from me, they didn't scream it. They whispered it. One forged document at a time. So, that's how I answered. Not with fire, with static. With small things they couldn't prove, couldn't report, couldn't control. Not enough to cause damage, just enough to make them wonder, is this happening? Or am I losing my mind? And just when they started to lose sleep, fear is powerful, but evidence is lethal. I had both, and it was time to use them. My parents had spent years taking from me, without ever leaving the house with a mask and a gun. Their crime wore a smile, a pen, a convenient lie wrapped in family. I wanted consequences, not chaos. So I took the most boring, brutal path I could. Paperwork. I started with a forensic accountant, a quiet guy named Amir. He worked with nonprofits, divorce lawyers, whistleblowers. I told him the short version. I need a clean, well-documented timeline. I want every dollar traced, every transfer backed up, and every forgery highlighted. He didn't ask personal questions. He just said, "Send me everything." I uploaded 10 years of files to an encrypted drive. Statements, memos, emails, screenshots, everything I had pulled in those sleepless nights at Grace's kitchen table. 3 weeks later, he gave me the cleanest, most deadly spreadsheet I had ever seen. It read like a confession. My father had been using 2 active shell companies, Hartwell Holdings and Atlas Cove Limited. The first was used to shift money from my business reserves into a personal equity line. The second was registered in Delaware under a nominee officer. Classic misdirection. Classic fraud. My mother wasn't just complicit. She co-signed 2 internal transfers using a digital authorization tied to my old tax ID, a system she helped me set up in 2013. They had built a mirror of my financial identity and then used it against me. The irony? They were sloppy, comfortable. They never expected anyone to reverse engineer the theft because they thought I'd just move on. Once I had the spreadsheet, I consulted 2 legal advisors. One was a family law expert in Atlanta, the other a financial abuse specialist who'd worked high-profile inheritance fraud cases. Both said the same thing. This isn't just theft. It's criminal misconduct. If you file, it sticks. But I didn't want a courtroom. I wanted something worse. I wanted their lives to collapse from the inside, publicly, legally, and inescapably. I didn't want them jailed. I wanted them shamed. So I went after their reputation first. I filed an anonymous whistleblower report to the IRS, detailed, specific, with all the supporting documents Amir compiled. I knew it would take months, maybe longer, but they'd be flagged. Their accounts, their filings, their real estate holdings, all under review. Then I reported Hartwell Holdings to the State Tax Fraud Division. Just a form, just a signature, but with the right attachments. It screamed, "Audit me." My father's business license was technically still active, so I submitted a conflict of interest alert to the Secretary of State's office under a pseudonym, with 3 examples of asset mismanagement and 1 forged contract, the one with my signature, scanned and dated. The moment that form landed, it was out of my hands. The process had begun. And my favorite part? I filed a quiet civil inquiry request through a third-party legal proxy. That meant their own legal counsel received a letter stating that a former party was considering financial action against them. Not a lawsuit, no demand, just pressure. The kind of letter that makes rich people hold emergency meetings with their lawyers. The kind that makes them stop sleeping. The kind that makes them afraid to check their mailbox. Grace asked me one night, "Won't they figure it's you?" I smiled. Maybe, but by the time they do, they won't have the money or clarity to do anything about it. I wasn't hiding. I was watching and building. For every dollar they took, I was stealing something back. Their safety, their certainty, their peace. The calls started 2 weeks later. My father called every accountant he knew. My mother went silent online. Their property manager in Arizona suddenly filed an inquiry about ownership documents. I watched it unfold like a weather map. Pressure systems, hot zones, a quiet financial storm built from paperwork, facts, and a woman who refused to be erased. They had rewritten the rules of our family. I was just showing them what happens when someone reads the fine print. My parents feared embarrassment. Courtrooms? They could handle that. They had lawyers for that. But headlines? Judgmental eyes in the grocery store? Having their names whispered behind country club napkins? That's what would destroy them. So I gave the public a story. I wrote a long-form blog post under a new pen name, Clara Vale, investigative ghostwriter, known for publishing quiet domestic fraud exposés. I designed the site from scratch. Clean, gray, respectable. Every article looked like it came from someone who knew what they were talking about. Then I published When Family Steals, a daughter's account of financial betrayal. 6,000 words, no names, no cities, but details. Dates, methods, quotes. I included redacted documents, screenshots of forged emails, annotated bank transfers. It wasn't emotional. It was surgical. I shared it with 5 mid-tier journalists I had ghostwritten for years ago and 1 editor at a women's finance magazine. Within 48 hours, it had over 30,000 views. Comments flooded in. "This sounds exactly like what happened to me. You're so brave for telling this story. How could parents do this?" I never confirmed my identity. I didn't have to. People started speculating, and eventually, someone recognized the pattern. My parents' names weren't trending, but in their circles, whispers started. One of my mother's charity board friends shared the article privately in a WhatsApp group. One of my father's former colleagues forwarded it to a group of retired real estate executives. Within a week, they both received polite cancellations from 2 upcoming social events. Their world was beginning to fold. And then I sent them the link. No message, just the URL. My mother didn't respond. My father tried calling. I didn't answer. A week later, I sent an offer. Not from me, but from a legal office they'd never heard of. A real firm, but using a representative. The letter was short. In light of growing exposure and escalating public interest, our client is willing to pause legal proceedings and additional publication in exchange for a formal, notarized confession of financial misconduct and signed acknowledgement of full responsibility. Not a lawsuit. A deal. Confess, and it stops. Stay silent, and it spreads. I gave them 7 days. On the 6th, I received the signed documents in a sealed envelope via courier. They didn't call, they didn't apologize, but they signed. 4 pages, all in legal language, but the subtext was simple. We did it. We know we did it, and we're afraid of what happens if the world knows, too. I could have pushed further, but I didn't need to. The damage was done. Their friends didn't trust them. Their social circles evaporated. Their accountant dropped them for internal restructuring. No one wanted to be attached to scandal. Meanwhile, I printed the confession, framed it, hung it in the back of my new office behind a locked cabinet door. Not for revenge, for remembrance. A reminder that silence is not the same as peace, and trust once stolen never comes back the same. Grace looked at me one morning and said, "You finally look like yourself again." I didn't answer. I just smiled. Because I didn't feel like my old self, I felt better. I moved to the coast 3 months after the confession arrived. A little house. Nothing fancy. White walls, big windows. You can hear the ocean if you leave the window open just enough. I painted the front door red. Not for symbolism, just because I always wanted a red door. I don't think about them every day, but I do think about what they taught me. Not the usual things. Not birthdays, manners, or how to use a salad fork. No. They taught me something far more permanent. They taught me who I am when everything is taken away. And more importantly, who I'll never be. Some people ask why I didn't sue, why I didn't go public with their names, why I didn't finish the revenge. The answer's simple. Because I did. I took their comfort. I took their silence. I took the illusion that they were the heroes in the story. And I made them look in the mirror. I didn't need their money back. I rebuilt mine. Better. Cleaner. Mine alone. My agency opened quietly, under a new name. Just 3 employees at first. Now 8. We design stories, campaigns, whole worlds. Sometimes clients ask why we don't show the founder's face on the website. I tell them, because the story matters more than the storyteller. I never spoke to my parents again. No dramatic closure. No final confrontation. Just distance. Clean and absolute. I heard they sold the Arizona house. Scaled down. Tried to repair their image. But reputations are like mirrors. Once cracked, you can glue them together again, sure. But they never stop showing the lines. I walk by the water every morning now. No headphones, no distractions. Just my feet in the sand and my breath in the cold air. I think of that first night on the bus, the version of me that was broken, used, erased. She never came back. And that's okay. Because I became someone stronger. They buried me. But I wasn't dead. I was planting roots, and now I've bloomed. My name is Olivia Hart. I am 38 years old. I built myself from ashes. And if you ever doubt your ability to rise, just remember, some flowers grow best after the fire. Thanks for watching. You can see more exciting stories right here.